very good morning to you all. I am Anuruddha Damage, Executive Council Member of Justica and Chairman of Justica Institute of Management. Warm welcome from Japan Sri Lanka Technical and Cultural Association, Justica, being one of the most performing AOTS Japan alumni in the globe, and Justica Institute of Management, JIM, as Justica's training arm. For our overseas friends from AOTS alumni fraternity who have joined today with us, we would like to warmly welcome you, Ayubowan. The series of webinars organized under theme Accept the Shake-up, Dealing with the Change is our way of helping our clients and corporates during post-COVID period and ensure we positively engaged professionals and decision makers in meaningful dialogues about matters that affect us all. This is to drive our strategy on assisting, guiding, and influencing all our regular and non-conventional clients, individuals, and corporates who have been our strength for last few decades in Justica's success story. Today's topic is Beyond Theories and Conceptual Frameworks, sharing key success factors with local and global scenarios for business continuity during post-COVID period. Areas of focus and conversation points around today's topic. Sharing actual best practices implemented during and after various crisis periods by local and global corporates, maybe SMEs, for them to have speedy recovery. Panelists will share their experiences with actual case studies. Also, which segments face the biggest setback? Do certain pockets go unnoticed? During COVID period, how best they can use previous lessons learned from those extraordinary corporates to get into their original wheels within minimum long-term damage. Also, we are focusing post-crisis success stories in global and local, best but simple and practical management tools used by those segments. Panelists, we want sustainable approaches during post-COVID period for quick comeback to natural. Do not think that our aim is not to downsize the values of theories and conceptual frameworks, but to explore the real thinking of human beings beyond theories and concepts and frameworks. To grace this timely and appropriate topic today with us, we have well-experienced, eminent panel of highly recognized panelists from Japan and Sri Lanka, and they are here with us to share their extreme experiences, success stories, and applicability of such experience in real world of work during post-COVID period, which we believe will add value to you and your organizations to have a speedy recovery during post-COVID period. We have with us today Mr. Sunil Vijay Singh, Chairman of United Motors Lanka PLC, Chairman Waterwala Plantations PLC, Chairman Real Property PLC, past President National Chamber of Commerce of Sri Lanka, and past President Employers Federation of Ceylon. Also, he is past President and Trustee Justica. We have with us today Ms. Toshiko Kawanami. We all mostly know her as Nami-san. She is a well-recognized and senior consultant in Japan on people development, also director of ICOSA, International Cooperation Organization for Small and Medium Enterprises in Asia, Japan. Also, we have with us today Dr. Sarath Buddhadas, member of Industrial Development Board of Sri Lanka, and also he is the CEO of Business Consultancy Services Private Limited, an expert and specialist in SME sector development in Sri Lanka. To lead the panel through this most needed topic today, we have one of the most senior, well-experienced and another highly recognized professional in Sri Lanka. He is none other than Mr. Mahinda Saranapala. He is the Director CEO of Kalani Cables PLC, past President and Trustee Justica, Trustee of Sasakawa Fund, Advisor Sri Lanka Association for Advancement of Quality and Productivity, and also he is the Advisor for Quality Management System Sri Lanka Standard Institute SLSI. Without taking your valuable time furthermore, I will hand over the baton to Mr. Mahinda Saranapala to take the journey with the topic. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Mahinda Saranapala.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction, Chetana, and good morning to all of you. Our first panelist is Mr. Sunil Vijay Singh, and we will give you 10 minutes to answer 2 questions. After that, in the second round, we will give you 2 to 3 minutes for further answers. So without further delay, may I ask the first question from Sunil? Uh, this is not the first crisis we are facing in Sri Lanka or in the world. You have faced many crises before in your long career. Could you tell us how you handled them and what the success factors were so that the younger generation could learn from them?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. As I said, we are not going to talk about theories and concepts and so on. I will give my practical experience. I have faced many crises before, and sometimes it is one crisis followed by another. But that's usual in your career, and especially if you're at a senior level, you'll be facing. But the important thing is crisis will come and crisis will go. But how you respond to the crisis, what you have done and what you have learned from the crisis, and how you have restructured your organization and yourself to handle future crises, and if you can even forecast what will happen next, that is the beauty of it. So I will take 3 examples from my personal career. And the first one I would like to take is when I was chairman and managing director of Dankoto Porcelain during the global financial crisis, when we faced a serious situation which was not felt by most of the other locals in Sri Lanka. It was faced mostly by exporters, where the export orders simply dropped because our buyers had difficulty, they had no money, some of them went bankrupt, the demand dropped in most of the Western countries, and in some cases the buyers were even willing to buy, but they didn't have, there were credit squeezes imposed by their banks, and sometimes the banks ran out of dollars and they couldn't open LCs and so on. So, but the problem that we had was that if you take the workforce didn't see anything like what we see here now. Now there is curfew, everyone knows, everyone is scared of the coronavirus, but there, locally, even the government officials said there is no crisis. And we knew that we had a crisis because our order book has dropped to about 50%. And the union said, well, we are not willing to suffer because it's a problem with the international marketing team that has not got orders. So I had to convince the people, take them into a confidence and explain the matters to them. I did a lot of internet research, found a lot of stories about how the really top-class porcelain and tableware companies were collapsing right around the world, and how even in Asian countries, the porcelain and ceramic companies were only offering work like 3 days a week or so. And people were desperate, people were losing jobs and all that. So I collected all this and made a PowerPoint presentation and presented to the entire workforce of 1,100, and then got their buy-in, because then only they were convinced that this is what is going on in the rest of the world, although we don't notice it. So after that, it was much easier for us to implement our plans. Of course, before that, we had also done a whole lot of other initiatives to analyze our performance, to focus exactly where we should cut costs without just going all over the place and ad hoc cost cutting. So this is just one example. So the focus there was communication, analysis of figures, and making everybody understand and buy into the restructuring plan. Other incident was when I was General Manager Ceramics Corporation. That was in 1988 during the Southern insurgency. Some of you may not even recall that, but everything came to a standstill, not because there was curfew, but because a particular group was insisting that we don't go for work. Petroleum was closed, so no fuel. We couldn't run our kilns, and if our kilns didn't have diesel at the right time to shut it down gradually over 2 weeks, it would have just collapsed, and that would have been a huge disaster. So we had to, once again, the workforce and even the executives didn't understand what was going on. So again, it was communication and so on. But one thing, when we felt that this was beginning to happen, what we did was we immediately start preparing a contingency plan. What if we don't get the petroleum bowsers? Where can we hire bowsers? Who is the contact detail? What is the telephone numbers, addresses, capacities of the bowsers? Same with lorries, same with where do we get clay, and a whole lot of things we documented, made a complete document of all contingencies, what we can do in the event the normal course of action doesn't take place. And that I understand is a normal thing in lots of foreign companies. They always have contingency plans for any emergencies. And the third story is at Merchant Bank, where it was a self-inflicted crisis where I had just taken over to restructure the
Thank you very much, Sunil, for that wonderful explanation of your experience. And the second question to you is, Justica has been promoting many Japanese techniques for the adoption in Sri Lanka, for adoption. This is because we believe that the way they responded to the crisis after the war was fascinating, and the Japanese techniques developed by them were successfully adopted all over the world with great success. Have you been able to implement some of these concepts and techniques in your workplace, and what adaptations were necessary to suit the socio-cultural milieu of Sri Lanka? Over to you, Sunil. Okay. Since Mr. Vijay Singh is having a technical issue, I may now invite Kawanami-san, and at the outset, welcome you, Kawanami-san. And also, you will have in the first round 10 minutes, and subsequently, I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to enlighten all of us. So your first question is, we understand that with your experience with SMEs of Japan, what is your advice to Sri Lankan business community how to manage the post-COVID period? You can add on your experiences and elaborate. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. I'm attending this webinar from Tokyo, where the state of emergency still remains, and people have been urged to stay at home every day as much as possible. Unfortunately, there are 142 small and medium-sized companies in Japan until today, which went bankrupt due to coronavirus. And there is even a more larger apparel company, which is called Renown. Some of you may know by name Renown, which everyone knows in Japan, announced only yesterday, that they will go through civil rehabilitation proceedings. It is such an unfortunate event for them. On the other hand, there are companies who are responding to the crisis very effectively, and who are taking this opportunity to change their corporate culture or explore new business. So today, I'd like to talk about 3 companies, real cases, in who are responding to coronavirus very effectively. The first company is named Ogura Kinzoku Company Limited. Kinzoku means metal in Japanese, and it is located in Ashikaga City. Ashikaga City is about 80 kilometers north of Tokyo. There are 330 employees, and the company is almost 100 years old. Ashikaga City has gained a global recognition as a mecca of 5S activities, and a number of people from all over the world visit Ashikaga every year to learn about 5S. Ogura Kinzoku is the first company that I would like to introduce to those people who are interested in 5S. Now, let me tell you how the company has responded to coronavirus in their own way. It was January 15th when the first coronavirus infection case was announced in Japan. Not many people paid so much attention at that time. On January 22nd, Ms. Noriko Ogura, vice president of the company, went to the Inner Beauty Expo at Makuhari Messe, which is one of the biggest exhibition sites in Japan. The hall was full of people and who are visiting Japan during the Chinese New Year. All of a sudden, Ms. Ogura noticed most of them were Chinese people, maybe from Wuhan, and some of them got infected already. And so this notice frightened her very much. So as soon as she went back to the office the following day, she called a meeting where she shared the story and announced a state of emergency declaration on the spot. Some employees wondered, do you really want to do it, Noriko-san? Isn't it too early? Nevertheless, she repeated the same message again and again, using every vehicle so that she could establish a sense of urgency among employees. She then assembled a group with enough power to lead all employees in the same direction to deal with coronavirus. Also, she purchased face masks from Vietnam in a hurry and distributed 3 masks to each and every employee. Now, the committee started taking a number of measures which they have never experienced. Hand disinfection at the entrance to the office, to the plant, to the employee cafeteria, and even in the office. They staggered the lunch hours so that employees can eat with social distance. Everyone was asked to wipe the table cleanly after lunch. An employee took turns to serve as supervisors to confirm that everyone was properly behaving. For Ms. Ogura, who needed to keep talking in the middle of the large room, which is very common in Japan, employees from the sales department got together and they made a handmade partition on her desk with cardboard materials. In summary, while the Japanese government was taking no concrete measures to fight against the spread of coronavirus, initial measures had been completed, taken at Kinzoku, which impressed me. Ms. Ogura also took this opportunity to change their corporate culture a little bit by having as many people as possible work from home, which no one has tried before. Their business is going very well on target, thanks to their measures, wonderful measures that they have taken, and they are in full operation right now. Well, even from the beginning, they have been in full operation. Now, second company I like to tell you about is Fujifilm Corporation, and their chairman CEO, Mr. Shigetaka Komori, who is 80 years old now. Fujifilm is a huge company with more than 279 consolidated subsidiaries, even though some of them are very small. But they used to manufacture only camera films, as film, you know, the name shows. And Fujifilm Toyama Chemical is under the spotting right now. They are one of their subsidiaries, small company. You know why? This company has been manufacturing Avigan for flu since 2014. and researchers in almost every company, every country, including China, confirmed quite recently that Avigan was clearly effective in treating COVID-19. It has been approved, not approved officially in Japan. As you know, everything goes so slowly in Japan, but very shortly. But many doctors started using this drug to treat the COVID-19, and a number of patients have been saved already. Fujifilm has gone through many changes in the development stages until now. They have recently entered even the cosmetic industry, taking advantage of their film technology. Mr. Komori, 80 years old now, talked about how companies can weather a storm like coronavirus just 2 days ago on TV. He said, what is needed now is strong leadership, a leader's sense of mission, preparedness, the quality of his decision-making, and the dynamism of speedy measures will determine the success or failure of his company. He also emphasized that in order to survive a crisis like today, it is essential to take bold action without missing the opportunity. He also added, to maintain a sense of urgency among employees is very important. Finally, I want to talk about a third company, which is Iris Oyama and the chairman Kentaro Oyama. The company has been developing and manufacturing new products from household goods to electronic appliances, which have very unique functions because they have been producing all those products based on consumers' dissatisfaction. So when all of Japan's consumer electronics manufacturers were struggling to compete with foreign companies, the company hired a large number of experts from other companies who was going through major restructuring, and many companies offered early retirement packages. So all those employees were hired by Iris Oyama, and they accelerated this Oyama's consumer electronics business very, very quickly. And they have manufactured solution products to address and reduce consumers' potential dissatisfaction, and they always tell other people so. And Mr. Oyama said on TV just 2 days ago, Japan is in the middle of a pinch. He used the word pinch. However, he said, we take the positive approach and view it as a change. It's a chance to change the pinch to an opportunity. And we continue to face the challenge with the spirits of solving issues, all issues in Japan. And the company is now in the process of increasing domestic production of face masks to.
No, Misan, your time is up now. I'll give you another round. Yes.
Yes, 150,000 per month. So those are the stories I wanted to share with you first, with you today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I get back to Sunil, please? Is he online?
Yes.
Sunil, yeah, we got disrupted on a technical issue. May I put the second question to you?
Yeah, before that, Mahinda, I couldn't complete the first one. So sorry for that interruption. My third example was from Merchant Bank. There, again, what I want to say is how taking the entire workforce into your trust and explaining things and analyzing the situation and doing the restructuring as a team, how that worked, because it was in a very bad state and almost on the verge of collapse when even with the union, we had signed a collective agreement, but the board decided that we have to really cut costs to the bone, otherwise we can't survive. And I had to go call a meeting of the entire staff and say, sorry, although we have signed a collective agreement, we are going to dishonor that. We can't honor, we can't give you the bonuses, the housing loans, the allowances, all that we have promised in that. I had taken advice from the Employers Federation, who said, you can do that, but don't repudiate the collective agreement, because as long as the collective agreement is in force, you have some protection. So we announced that all glum faces right round, but later on the union leader came and met me and said, officially we can't accept your position because we are going to protest, because you can't withdraw. We can go to the Labour Department and they will ask you to restore. I said, yes, I'm very well aware of this, because it's gazetted, it's a law. But if you do that, we are back to square one. They said, but we are not, we know that there is no better alternative. You have to go ahead with this. So we will not disrupt your plan, but officially we will boycott official functions and all that, but we will never disrupt anything. So finally, we got through that and everything was restored back again. And the union leader was called by even the Employers Federation as a speaker, talking about very good examples of management labor cooperation. So, but one thing the union leader said, we trust the management. We trust the management in this exercise, so that's why we supported. So that's what you have to do in a time of crisis. You have to take it like a team. It is, we are all in this together and all have to support. So that's the last example. Yes, Mahinder.
Yeah, the second question to you is, Sunil. Yeah, Justica has been promoting many Japanese techniques for adoption in Sri Lanka. This is because we believe that the way they responded to the crisis after the war was fascinating, and the Japanese techniques developed by them were successfully adopted all over the world with great success. Have you been able to implement some of these concepts and techniques in your workplace? What adaptations were necessary to suit the socio-economic, cultural milieu of Sri Lanka?
Yes, I think we always adapted. We changed a little bit of those Japanese techniques, because I learned many of the Japanese techniques in 1980 when I was first in Japan on an industrial and systems engineering training course. And but it's much easier to understand the difficulties and problems in implementing when we get examples from the West, because the exact Japanese things are embedded in their specific culture. So sometimes it's difficult to adapt it as it is. But we have adapted a lot of these things, and especially during the crisis. I remember during the crisis, during the Southern insurgency, when I was chairman ETF, ETF people were working, their quality circles were working. In fact, visitors who would come and say, surprising in a government organization how you have these people working. But they did a lot of changes, changed the forms, changed the application forms and so on to be more productive. But one thing that I promote a lot is the maintenance, the total productive maintenance part, which originally came after World War II, when the Japanese government said many of our factories were destroyed. So we have to treat the machines of available factories like precious family heirlooms and treat them well, because we can't let these machines break down. And I think this is what we need here, whether it is for big companies or even the small companies. Our focus on maintenance is very poor. So whereas if you take some of these Japanese practices, unfortunately we don't have time to go into all these things. Then even the Kaizen approach of getting ideas from everybody, we can't have a top-down approach here. We have to get everybody's ideas. How do you respond to this crisis? What new business avenues can we get? We need that Kaizen type of whatever we do today, can we do something better tomorrow? That Kaizen philosophy has to be inculcated in our organizations, and organizations which have done that are likely to be more successful.
Thank you, Sunil. And may I now get back to Dr. Buddhadasa. Your first question is, you have wide experience in dealing with SMEs in Sri Lanka, and what is your advice to them as they are an integral part of our economy, and how to face the COVID-19 pandemic and continue your business? Over to you, Dr.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Ms. Saranpal, when it comes to SME sector, that is regarded as the backbone of any economy, and our SME sector is about 98.5% of the total enterprise in Sri Lanka, SMEs. And SMEs are the most hit because of this COVID situation. So we are hit, and we are badly hit. And if you look at the world scenario also, you can see some examples. In fact, we have not done much research into this area, especially what is the impact or how it is impacting the SME sector, the health issue. But if you go to USA, there are about 30 million SMEs. Out of 30 million SMEs, about 12 million are about to be collapsed within the next 2 to 3 months. You go to India, the SME Forum, Binod Kumar says out of 86,000 members of his forum, 26,000 are about to be collapsed within the next 5 months. So this is the seriousness of this issue. But coming to this issue, I like to draw your attention, because when you go, I mean, it's very difficult for us to draw examples from the history and see how best we can apply them on this situation, because this crisis is not like the earlier recessions that we have experienced. Like in one example, one close example is 1918. We had this Spanish flu, where about 10 million people died. And then again, in that scenario, we don't have any literature or studies or surveys done as to how that epidemic impacted on the economy. And then comes the First World War and Second World War, recession. And 2008, there was a recession. But there's another variable that has come into the market today. That is the COVID-19. Because, even if you have a static situation or market-wise, macro-wise static situation, but, if you take the small business, you can't go out, you know what happened to your customer. There's a customer shock, there's a supply shock, and therefore there's a production shock. There's a total collapse of the supply chain. And then this third variable, which is coming from the health sector, is, creating havoc. And therefore, it's very difficult for us to, take examples from the past and try to understand this phenomena, because it's a very unique, complex situation. But although we have not done much research into this area with regard to SME sector, but I have been, talking to about 100 business leaders in the country for the last 3 weeks. And I found there are 2 categories, in fact, 3 categories. There are business leaders or businesses which are doing very well still. They're facing the crisis okay. And they have kept their head strong. And then leaders are showing their entrepreneurial leadership, and they are not fearful about the situation. They have got the confidence, and they have got the entrepreneurial ability to meet the situation. And that is mainly the large scale sector. It's very about 1.5% of the total sector. And then the second segment is medium entrepreneurs. They are down, they are going through a very traumatic situation, and they are perplexed. And in some of the people I know having sleeping disorders, they are getting angry, they are psychologically affected. So this is a very serious situation, and they don't know how to come out from the situation. They are like solutionless kind of a situation. And micro sector, worse it, and they don't know what to do. So in such a scenario, what I did with some of my clients and also my experiences is where I was able to identify a few areas where you have to intervene. These are the problem areas. Number one is working capital. Now, when it comes to working capital, we can't do much about the SME sector because they have not been having a strategy plan in their history. So they are not prepared for this, eventuality, this crisis, and they have to, resort to government subsidies like 5 billion money offered through Saubhagya program. They can, use that fund, and also if they have money, they can use for working capital. If they don't have money, they have to somehow find money, even like dispose in their fixed assets which are not, productive, and that is one area. But the thing is, I have been working with few organizations where I had, I was facilitating strategic planning. Those organizations are, able to meet this threat very successfully. So now they are in a pit. They are in a pit. They have to come out from the situation. Now, what is my recommendation is now look into your past where you had perennial issues other than the COVID. It's like, they never had the majority, they never had the strategic planning. They were not technology savvy, and they had very poor management, and technology wise they are very, very low, and they were resistant to change, and there were a lot of marketing problems. They didn't have market research. So when they come out from this situation, they have to find solution to all these areas and get prepared to live in the post-COVID situation. And for that, my recommendation is do a very short-term strategic plan. That is what I am doing with few organizations in Sri Lanka now. They look into their whole body and scan the body and identify what are the areas they have to make adjustment and come out with a strategic plan. And in this strategic plan, make one important thing: how you are going to meet the health issue, health problem. That's one area we have to, develop a strategy, because we are expecting another wave. Even yesterday, the WHO was warning that we may go in for another wave. So how are you going to meet that situation? So here you develop your strategic plan. You have marketing strategies, diversification strategies, and also financial strategies, and then new normal situation. How you are going to sustain your operation depends on mainly your strategic planning. The other thing is, the people are psychologically affected.
You have 2 minutes more, Dr.
Yeah, psychologically affected. For that, I think they must have self-motivation. They have to think of their positive aspects and develop a positive frame of mind and see that they can meet this challenge with a very strong mind and come out with the situation. That is entrepreneurship. And whereas there was a study done in Sweden with regard to 2008 research, where they concluded entrepreneurial orientation was the #1 key factor that was helped the Swedish companies to sustain such a shock. So entrepreneurship has to come in, entrepreneurial leadership. Thirdly, look into your customer aspect. The customers are different now. They have become more health conscious. They have become very hygiene oriented, and they have become patriotic, and they want to go to their doorstep, study your customers, and develop customer approach and strategy. That's another important area. You can go for, technology solutions like, e-commerce, online, and digital solutions. That is one. And thirdly, look after employees. And all this time we have been, professing that you are the lifeblood of our organization, and we have been training them. We are trying to get their productivity, trust, build up trust and commitment, dedication, loyalty, everything, and that will come, translated into rupees and cents. So this area now, most of the companies have turned towards the employees and started cutting their salary. So that is very dangerous area, because if you are going to get their support in the future also, you must have trustworthy employees set. And for that, please mindful, don't touch their salaries, but look after their motivation, dedication, loyalty, and trust, and then get them to your company again, and we make them more productive. So that is one another area. So thank you very much. These are my experiences, and during the question time we'll have a discussion on this.
Thank you very much. And now I will pose my first question to Mr. Sunil Vijayasinghe. Sunil was talking about 2 key areas: change and adaptation. Can you give us a few examples, Sunil, where change and adaptation helped you in your earlier crisis, so that our listeners can benefit from to face the present pandemic?
Yes, I think based a little bit on what Dr. Buddhadas also said, strategic planning is important. And I think in every case, we were doing strategic planning because we have to do scenario analysis now, scenario forecasting. What will the business hold? Have we got to change our business model itself? And sometimes you have to change our business model. For example, even at Danko after the global financial crisis, we had to change our business model from a sort of a mass producer where we would send 10 containers of one design. After that, we decided that we can only survive if we become a specialist contract manufacturer. So after that, we were shipping one container with 10 designs as opposed to earlier 10 containers with the same design. So we had to adjust. Of course, you get higher margins. So the success for each institution will be different. Now, what the COVID will entail, I don't know, because I am not a health expert. Whether the second wave will come, I don't know. I can only talk about the economic impacts on our enterprises arising out of this. And when we are trying to change, because usually people are averse to change, because Sri Lankan culture is also averse to change. So we need to make people understand that we want to change. We want that change is necessary, and therefore it is the responsibility of management to do that. And there are so many change management models. So first thing that I would recommend anybody is to always keep on talking about the dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs. Why is this current state of affairs not good? Why should it change? So even not only in a situation like COVID, even when we are privatizing Danko, that's what we did. We said this being a state-owned enterprise with very little capital, these are the problems we are having. We have no market. So we need a better partner, and we managed to get even the workers to clean up the place and do all that to participate, to bring in a new owner. And that was one of the most successful privatization exercises without any riots and so on. So we need to surface dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs, bring people to participate in the change, create a vision of what the future is, and also at the same time, I think now there is a big wave about employee engagement, where you talk about the strategic narrative, where you talk about where are we taking this organization. So everybody buys into this new strategic narrative, and they are engaged in it. They are all participants. They are not just employees, just a mere cog in the wheel. So in many of the organizations, I have done this, and I strongly believe that we have to take the employees with us, because once at a training program in Japan, our professor asked us, why does the Shinkansen run so fast compared to ordinary train? The answer was simple, because in an ordinary train, you have a leader, you have the engine, which pulls the train along. But in the Shinkansen, there is power in every carriage. And because they are all empowered carriages, the Shinkansen can run much faster than an ordinary train. So these are some of the issues. Thank you.
Okay, Sunil, thank you very much. And we have a question to Kavanam. Before that, I think your presentation talked about mainly revolved around good leadership. I would say excellent leadership, one of the key factors to come out of a crisis like that. Then there's a question from the audience from Mr. Atula Edrisinghe. It is not related to the topic, but anyway, Kavanami-san, can Sri Lankan companies benefit by Japanese Prime Minister's offer of US $2.2 billion stimulus package for Japanese companies to exit or relocate from China?
Well,
as I said, the question is not related to the subject anyway. It's up to you.
There's a lot of discussion about that, argument about that, and Because I'm sorry, I'm not a specialist in that
Okay,
area.
okay, thank you.
But
Yeah.
but many people are criticizing the Japanese
Yeah,
government
yeah,
or things that Abe is trying to promote.
Thank you. And some of the other things that struck me from this webinar today, leadership, of course, took the best top place, change, adaptation, preparedness. Now, for a future crisis, are we prepared? Now, Sunil was talking about contingency plans. Now, we don't know, maybe climate change, maybe a disaster, maybe health issue. Preparedness, I think, in my opinion, is a key area we all of us have to look into. Other than that, there was strategic planning, then about digitalization. We even this time, Sri Lanka also changed a lot, by ordering, delivering home, without going to the place. Then, any more questions from the audience? No. Right. Then one other, before I sum up, I think I would like to leave you with this message. We can elaborate on that. The fundamental key to addressing the crisis is for leaders to not only be honest about the situation and what you are going to do about it, but that you do so with clarity, humility, and heart, so as to remind people we are in this together. So I'll open it to the panelists. You're free to come out with your suggestions and ideas.
I think, Mr. Sarnapala, this is the time, and your topic is very relevant beyond theories and conceptual framework. We have been talking about theories, but now it's a crisis situation. Some of the theories may not work,
Right.
Some theories may not work. Some of the Western or Eastern theories may not work. I would say the entrepreneurial leadership. Entrepreneurial leadership. Now, for instance, one organization where I work as a consultant, and we want to start our production, people are not coming. The families are not allowing them to come for work. And the PHI says, don't go out, don't go from this area. And their relatives say, don't go to work and you'll be in trouble. So what do? And we started, communication loop, and started talking to each and every employee and their parents and convinced them. What is the situation, how we are going to look after you when you come back to our production area, what health preparations that we are going to make for you to take you into your safety, and how we are going to offer you boarding places, how we are going to look after you. And then about the second wave, and this is the uncertain area. I mean, it's not, as I told you, it's not static, because very uncertain situation. We don't know when the COVID will end. It may be 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or 6 months. But now we think that by around August we will come on to a positive path. But still, if the third wave comes, what are you going to do? But in one organization where I work as a consultant, now we started rapid response team. Rapid response team to look into this and be prepared. And then sometimes, people don't listen to you. And just, participatory approach may not work. And sometimes you have to be a little hard on them and give to discipline them, because the Sri Lankan situation, you see, some people are not really listening to you. So just awareness and participation may not work. Rigid rules and regulations and getting to be disciplined is also important, because there's a health issue. If something happens in your organization, and that will affect your production, and the whole business will collapse. If one person contracted COVID, the whole business is closed. So it's a very serious situation. You have to be prepared. You have to be very entrepreneurially prepared. Otherwise, it will not work.
Thank you, Dr. Buddha. So then also, I would like to just to mention that adaptation and change, a huge, I won't mention names, apparel company in Sri Lanka changed and adapted to the situation. They have got a massive order to export surgical masks to USA. So now that is a quick change, adaptation to the current situation and changing your business model. I'm sure all of you all will agree that there will be many more to talk about such models. Sunil, any comments?
Yeah, I think it's situational. So for different organization, sometimes for some organizations, adaptation may be very easy. Even for certain manufacturing organizations, certain different things will be much easier to change. But for others, it will be very hard to change their basic production unless massive investment is made, because that's the nature. But I think there is no question about it that innovation and scenario forecasting is what we need. We need to know what is going to happen in the future in 10 years time, 20 years time. Once when I was following a strategic planning course in the UK, the lecturer said, this is what you have to do. Read Arthur C. Clarke, read all science fiction, and then you will know what's happening in the future. And one very good example of strategic planning exercise, which was rolled out to the entire workforce by Sri Lankan Airlines long time ago when I was on the board. It was, the entire thing was on scenarios for the future in 10 years time, 20 years time. And at that time, they forecasted that there is nothing on paper. Everything is online. Your boarding pass comes on your phone and so on. So that's the type of thinking that we need to do to see what is going to happen. So, but just one other comment I would like to make about cutting salaries and so on. I agree with Dr. Buddhadasa on that, but there are certain companies where the labor cost component is so high that there is no way that their cash flow will permit them to keep on paying salaries. And that in such cases, even I am personally against cutting the salaries. And that's something I have lived with right along, especially at non-executive level. I don't recommend this at all. And as in terms of building up loyalty to the organization, I don't recommend this at all. But there is no choice sometimes. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Kawamani-san, any comments? Your presentation was very interesting. A little bit of elaboration on leadership. Ogura-san's leadership.
Yes. May I add one more thing about what I learned from Mrs. Ogura? Final message that I received from her. She said that, you know, they are very well known for their 5S activities, but she stresses that yes, 5S is important. Kaizen is very important. They actually receive about 1,000 proposals from employees. And so she says 5S, Kaizen, and performance, they are all very important. But she stresses the most important thing for the management is keep employees safety. Unless employees, they can't do anything. So for her, she says the most important thing is safety, employee safety, employee safety. She kept, you know, saying the same things again and again. Thank you.
Okay, there is one more question that has come from the attendees. I think it is also not relevant to the topic we are talking about. Anyway, I'll put it across. Do you think banks in Sri Lanka actually supporting to make entrepreneurs? It seems banks are not supporting to people who have ideas on business but don't have capital to start. I think Sunil, you might be able to touch upon that.
Well, thank you. I can't speak for banks now, but having been involved with banks earlier, I can say that banks have to depend on the shareholders' money and the depositors' money. So that is why banks are heavily regulated to make sure that public deposits are safe, and that when banks take deposits, you promise a certain return to the depositor. So, but depositors will trust the bank, because of the trust they place on the bank, that they will deposit the money expecting the declared return. You cannot risk that. So if my basic position is, if the banks are there to are required to help small industries and so on at a higher level of risk, then who is going to take that risk? Should the government take that risk? Because the banks cannot take that risk. So this is why many countries have development banks. And if you have studied the development banks, the non-performing portfolios of development banks is always very high, because they take risks and lend, because they want to lend to startups. They can't ask for collateral and all that. So they are funded separately. Venture capital companies are funded separately, and those who fund know that there is a risk. So there has to be a different mechanism. Otherwise, it can be a little tricky.
Okay, thank you. I think going back to that bank question, I think what they are referring to is, now many countries have given what is called a stimulus package. Australia, USA, Germany, Japan, Bangladesh. So if you give a stimulus package to the entrepreneurs, the people in Australia, I understand, given 750 Australian dollars per person, one-time payment. Now that kind of stimulus package has not taken place in Sri Lanka. So there are many countries going forward with the stimulus package, and that's the way forward to resurrect the economy, to give an injection, a boost to the economy. In my opinion, it should be a stimulus package given by the government. Okay, with that, any other questions before we close? I think time up. We have 2 minutes more. Yeah, there's another question. I think, do you believe USA and UK will come to normal demand of Sri Lankan apparel near future, or will it take more than years to times? It's a difficult question. Anyway, in any crisis, the world has been resilient, especially Sri Lankans have been resilient. We have always come back, right? With better ideas, better coping with the demand changes, adaptations, and so I believe we will get back. Sri Lanka is strong country, good people, believe change. My own experience working in industry, so adaptation, change. So with that, I think I will wind up, and thank you very much, everyone, for your ideas and suggestions opening up. And I think it was a very lively webinar. Hope we will have many more webinars of this nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahenda Saranapala. You have been leading the panel. Really great way to address the topic. And on behalf of Justica and Justica Institute of Management, I would like to thank our panelists for today, Mr. Sunil Vijayasinghe and Ms. Toshiko Kawanami, all the way from Japan. Thank you. And also Dr. Sarath Buddhadas and our moderator for the day, Mr. Mahenda Saranapala. I would like to thank you all. Thank you very much to grace this first session. And I think we had only 3,600 seconds. So I think we have given the best back to the audience within that critical time period. So our today topic was beyond theories and conceptual frameworks. And once again, we would like to see you another 6 days back on next Sunday with our second session that will be on another interesting topic, boundless opportunities, dig it, cultivate it, harvest it. The ways and means of capitalizing emerging opportunities in agriculture, agro-based food production, and virgin market trends. We are meeting with you all and other eminent panelists, including Sri Lanka and other foreign countries. Once again, thank you very much for attending this, and see you again. Stay safe.